Yes, it has happened. Play in group stage has ended for groups C and D, which means congratulations are in order for Cloud9 and G-Rex respectively. Meanwhile, Gaslight Gamers and Kaboom have been eliminated. So pour one out for the southern area of the Americas. It's a bit of a BG for them so far this tournament. Which really brings me back to the topic of Gaslight Gamers. Obviously, we have the FM and, of course, Supermassive, who are kind of low-hanging fruit if I want to highlight something that play-in teams are doing well, right? But if there's a team like Gaslight Gamers that cannot even win a single game in group stage, obviously Infinity Esports tomorrow can still tie their record, but so far that they look like kind of the worst or one of the worst teams in the play-in stage, and it's a little bit sad. So is there anything about this team that's really, really good and really exciting to watch and something that we can learn a little bit from or talk about and highlight? And I really do think there is, which is why the title of this video is Nate the Great, because I wanted to talk about the final game between Gaslight Gamers and Kaboom Esports, in which I felt like this game was pretty close, at least in the offset, because I felt like Gaslight Gamers were actually prioritizing objective control and spacing out the map more, had a better understanding of how to play around priority, how to play to their win conditions, and they used their top laner to do that on the Camille. So the first thing you may notice is that I have indeed got myself a pen tool. Some of you in the comments section suggested that I should take a page out of LS's book and try to incorporate that into the VOD reviews. We'll see how this goes. This is the first time I'm using it, so if it goes horribly, I'm blaming it. Just kidding, just kidding. I actually think it will be helpful if I can learn it, so in the meantime, bear with me. The first section of this game that we kind of want to talk about is going to be something that looks like a really bad play for Gaslight Gamers. A really bad situation, but if you notice the way that the top lane wave is, so you notice the way the top lane wave is when Shen TPs, it's actually going to be in priority for Nate. So Nate not using TP plus going into this fight ends up being very significant, especially with the way the wave is pushed and the fact that Shen also TPs to join. Now, obviously this fight is not the best for KLG. GRX end up getting first blood and another kill back off of that, but I actually do not think that it is the worst ever. The fact that Stitch gets a kill is actually pretty big, but other than that, I would say that this fight is almost in favor of KLG. You have at the top side of the map, you have the wave stacking here now, more red minions than blue minions on the top side of the map, and that's going to give Nate a very big advantage. So right now he has 24 CS to 21, and that number is going to change pretty significantly. As soon as the replay comes back, we have the fact that there are low death timers really early on in this game, and Tier Wolf and the bot lane end up getting back to lane before our friend Stitch ends up being able to back off of his advantage. So this creates a window in which, as you can already see here, Nate has 39 CS to 26. So they have TP advantage on top of a massive CS lead. You didn't think that that priority mattered that much, but that amounts to like about 10 minions in total that Nate was able to get off of that. Plus, he could back, he had the luxury of being able to walk to lane, and KLG get this dragon because of Stitch's greed. So all in all, I would say this play net benefit to KLG, even though they seem to be super behind in gold. The fact that their gold is on the relevant lane, the lane that should be winning, the lane that should have priority, matters a lot for them. So after that, you have more of G-Rex kind of playing to priority. You have their bottom lane constantly stacking the wave and looking for 4-man, 5-man group plays on the bottom side. And you have Shen going to join them, right? Shen going to join them while the wave is pushed up in the same fashion as we already saw, and therefore Nate is able to continue to grow his lead. It's a pretty simple thing there, so Nate has to, in the end, make it so his trade is going to matter more than bot. Obviously, that's a bit hard because you're against a Kai'Sa, but you have to be able to kind of maximize this type of advantage and push out in a sense that you're not fighting. You're not in a position where Kai'Sa can force on the mid without you getting something even more important for it. And that's kind of gonna be Nate's objective going forward. All right, for example, we have, this has just happened, right? We've had a big force on the bot side. Shen TP'd again against priority, so you have 63 to 41 CS lead. Nate is pushing in the wave. He's ready to continue to punish Shen, but you also have Tearwolf on the top side. So this is probably where you have KLG playing best to their tempo side. I would say that there were a lot of times where I felt like Skarner was kind of going bot defensively when there was nothing for him to really get here, but here is probably the best example in the whole game, in the early game, where Skarner is playing well to where KLG kind of have their powder advantage. Alright, so Shen coming back to lane, still ready to lose a couple creeps here, and we have Skarner laying in wait for... You have Skarner using the advantage of the fact that Tearwolf is at the top and getting the red buff that should belong to GRX. So they also know that because the red buff just spawned, it's very likely for Empty to kind of go top. And they wait for him in this brush. You have Nate channeling it back, but Empty unfortunately shows up and gets punished for this. So this is a really good example of KLG using the fact that they're building up the advantage on this side of the map and playing to tempo correctly here. After this, I would say there are kind of a lot of mistakes that KLG make, but key and important to note is that if you go through the entire early game, except for the parts that I've noticed, then Nate will basically never TP if he doesn't have the wave push. He always TPs if he has to, and sometimes when he doesn't have to, only when the wave will bounce back to him, and the slowly building wave will kill creeps for PK so that he can maintain his lead over the enemy top laner, which puts him in a good position by the time he has Tiamat and Triforce to begin pressuring the side lane really hard. So this is where I feel like the really good things that KLG do actually begin to shine through after the initial setup phase, because obviously in the early game you can see Kai'Sa has 6 kills, and I would say that GRX overall made better trades on their tempo side. Okay, so kind of what you're noticing here is we have our hero Nate on the bottom side of the map. He knows that if he doesn't push the wave past river, he's in a position where there's a lot of creeps built up. Shen could theoretically catch up to him. So he has to sort of stay with the wave as long as there's a big wave building up. He has to be in position to punish Shen for trying to farm or get up, and then he also has to be able to push past river to the turret so that he can join his team if it's necessary to happen. So here we go. We're in a position where he's kind of going on to PK. He's punishing PK because he knows his team is like, okay, we want to get vision around this Rift Herald. We want to start playing for Rift Herald. How can you help us out? And what he's doing is he's pinning Shen to the lane and setting up for his team to succeed in this position. Meanwhile, you have Plugo on the top side, so he's also looking to push past river. He's also looking to set up this wave so that he can move on priority. And you have his mid lane looking for a pick based on the fact that Plugo can move earlier. Unfortunately, you know, we have Shen. They got the TP out of Shen, so that's good for them. They look to disengage, but obviously KLG's execution isn't the best. The important thing to note here is this. Even though you have KLG losing out in the mid area, Nate is still winning in the bot lane. Nate is still pushing here, which means that even if in the mid lane these guys are winning a fight, these guys are pushing forward, any trade they make, they're technically behind in tempo. Nate has more threat on this tower here, right, than they have on this tower. So as the game progresses, you're going to get to a point where you're 20 minutes in, Baron is spawning. Which turret is going to be more valuable to have? Not this turret, not even this turret. Definitely this one. Because you can have so much threat with this split pusher on this area so that you have GRX constantly moving to defend that turret, constantly moving to defend their inhib, because if Nate keeps pushing, this becomes the next target. This becomes the next target, all the way to the point where he can kind of take the entire base if you're not defending this. So you don't want Nate to keep pushing and have a tempo advantage over you going here, because you're not going to have the same amount of map threat on the mid lane as you would on a side lane when Baron spawns. So this becomes a very important target, and the fact that Nate can threaten this while you're in the mid lane makes you stop from advancing beyond one objective. So as you can see, Nate's still pushing, right? He gets the turret. KLG behind him in tempo managed to get this turret. He's still pushing. He's still pushing. They cannot go for a second objective because they know that he'll take that turret. So you can see them back off already here. And this is a really good winning position for KLG to be in. So because GRX obviously have the Tahm Kench, we've kind of gone over in other videos how much power Tahm Kench can give you, then Nate also has to back off. But at least they burn the Tahm Kench roll, which ends up being pretty good for them overall. And even better here, Nate kills the Tahm Kench. So even if he didn't though, even if he didn't crucially, perhaps even if he died here, you have a position where now GRX are all over here. All of them are over here. And you have the ability for KLG to move from where they were kind of clearing out the mid. They managed to push out the mid lane so that the wave would reset, right? And now they have priority to kind of move up here to go for the Herald because Nate, by himself, moved all of these players, plus the Lissandra, plus the Tahm Kench was now dead, down to his side of the map and managed to get out. Even if he didn't get out, even if he didn't kill the Tahm Kench, that is still a huge thing for KLG because they can move all the rest of their members, all the rest of their members are mobile to move on to the Rift Herald. The next play I want to talk to you guys about has to do with Nate being able to pressure that turret. He has it past 1/3 of its health, and Seerwolf is shadowing him in case Nocturne ults in and tries to kill him, which is something that Nocturne can do. Nocturne can easily shut down sideline pushers. However, KLG kind of have tempo overall, and they use that to try to force something mid. Not exactly the best idea, because right now their 3 or their 4 lose pretty hard without Nate involved. So it's much better for KLG here to just soft reset the wave and stall time, because Nate will be able to slowly pick at that turret. Nate will be able to engage on the Shen as long as they know that all GRX are there. So if they soft reset the mid wave, let's just talk about this very briefly before we get into the next part of the play. The way that this should play out, okay, is Nate should remain here. So we have our friend Nate down here. He should remain there. And then you have our friend Lissandra. Candy is up here trying to get pressure. Trying to get pressure in his own way while I learn pen tool, sorry. Lucian catches the wave, but Nate here has tempo. So GRX, or excuse me, KLG kind of let that get to them, and they moved forward on this wave, right? And they tried to force, but unfortunately their 3 clearly loses to 10, or I guess he didn't have 10 kills at this time, but a multi-kill Kai'Sa, a very, like a 2-item Kai'Sa, effectively. He has 2 items completed plus a Zeal. Meanwhile, Lucian only has the Blade of the Ranking. So you know you definitely are kind of not in a good position there. You're not gonna have a fun time. So what they should be doing instead is they should just be playing really safe, sort of soft resetting this, and then having Lucian continue to catch this wave. If Lissandra wants to group here and try to force, they just start soft resetting. They're not pushing past river at all. They have a really hard line here in the middle of this river that they cannot walk past. Nope, not at all. They just constantly push the wave. GRX catch it, GRX push it, try to extend forward and get something. Meanwhile, Nate is all the way up here. So eventually what will happen is either GRX has to send someone to deal with Nate, so send a couple of members of GRX over here to deal with Nate, and then in that case, KLG have the option of going in here and getting wards, getting vision coverage here, blocking out all of GRX's vision, and managing to get good control of that. So that's what the threat that Nate will get them. Either that, or they stay there and they try to force KLG smartly back off, and Nate gets his turret and continues threatening their base. So these are kind of the 2 options, and this is how the slow game will eventually favor KLG. Obviously, that's not what happened. While Plugo and Slow are dead, Nate pushed to the turret, so now, as we talked about, the red minions will come back and favor him. When he goes and catches those, he'll be even more ahead of the Shen. But while Plugo and Slow are on death timers, Nate walks over, pushes out mid, and manages to, with the rest of his team who's still alive, get a good flank onto koala and continue to wipe out the rest of GRX, who probably shouldn't have gone there, didn't have the tempo to go there, and had expended a lot of their ultimates, a lot of their abilities, and couldn't win that fight overall. Meanwhile, Plugo and Slow respawn, and KLG are in position to take the Baron. Obviously, you're kind of wondering at this point, okay, you have the waves bouncing, so GRX are ultimately losing from this, but at the same time, they don't want to lose the Baron, so are you overstaying a little bit on the play? If you're going for this, it's whatever, you know, they get the Baron. That's ultimately probably a good win for them. Stitch, how much, honestly, let's be honest here, how much more out of control can Stitch really get at this point? How much more? Yeah, so not exactly perfect, no. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff I sort of glossed over, I didn't really draw attention to. For example, why is Lucia necessarily matching the Lysandra and clearing the wave there? Are they moving far forward when there's definitely 4 that could join? You know that you see Nate there. You know that he's not going to join you, but Lysandra is kind of in fog of war. These types of situations that I browsed under the log, not the best game ever from KLG, but I think it's really important to highlight that they really understood where their strong side was, which I don't always see. I haven't seen it as much from Gambit, for example. I haven't seen it from a lot of teams. I haven't seen it from Cloud9 nearly as much, right? So there are good things to shout out for KLG for sure. The fact that they knew their strong side, the fact that they had a concept of, oh, okay, sometimes it's just better for me to stay in sideline. Sometimes it's better for me to threaten this turret than to join my team because I'm not going to do nearly as much for them as I can by kind of doing this pressure game, by opening opportunities for them to get Baron control without me. I think a bit of a misconception is that you have to have your top laner kind of push past river and constantly group with you so that you have his threat to get Baron. But if your top laner is super far ahead and he's pushing up and threatening the turret, then people will have to pull off to him. And there's opening to get Baron control. There's opening to do these types of things. And I think that KLG deep down understand that and are demonstrating these concepts to a somewhat basic level. But if there's a little bit more play, then I can see kind of them develop. We might see a little bit more out of them over time. And I think that that's really cool and really important to say, okay, these play-in teams have an idea of what's going on and there's still stuff that we can learn from them for sure.